Hello and welcome to Therapists Connect broadcasts. My name's Kaz Binstead and I'm the co-lead here at Therapists Connect. And I'm here today for what is hopefully going to be a really special and interesting interview. Some of you will know that Therapists Connect celebrates a birthday in January. So we turn 3 on January the 6th. And each time we have one of these celebrations, we like to invite 1 or 2 people who we feel have made a significant contribution to our profession. And we invite them to come along for what's known as our lifetime achievement interviews. We've invited 2 people this year, and I'm really delighted to be here today with Professor Lynn Gabriel, OBE. Hello, Lynn.
Hi, Kaz. Lovely to be here and speaking with you.
Yeah.
And hopefully to your wider community in Therapists Connect.
Yeah, thank you.
And I hadn't realised it was 3 years coming up. That's great.
Yeah. We started in the pandemic year 2020. So it's been quite an interesting time actually. But yeah, it's brilliant to have you here. I'm going to do just a little introduction, not too much because we're obviously going to talk about your life and work anyway. But Lynn Gabriel is Professor of Counselling and Mental Health and Founding Director of York St John Community Centre, based at York St John University, where Lynn has worked for 20 years. She's done a lot of different things and continues to do a lot of different things in this role, including chairing the university's research degree committee, leading on the postgraduate taught MA programme, supervising doctoral candidates in counselling psychology and mental health, and also examining PhD candidates. Lynn is involved in many different projects, which we're definitely going to talk about today. But she has a special professional and research interest in practice ethics and has chaired BACP's Ethics and Good Practice Committee for several years. Finally, Lynn is a pluralistic counsellor and researcher. So let's get into it. One thing I absolutely love is a passionate person. And when I was reading all your stuff, I was like, I cannot believe how much Lynn has done. And I can see like there's things that stand out in terms of obviously your interests and that you've done lots of different pieces of work in certain areas. So I guess I just wanted to start with the first question, which is, what is it that you love about this profession?
Oh, it's a huge question. There's lots that I love. But I'll start with the people. So it might sound a bit odd to say you might love your client work or love clients, but I've worked with lots and lots of clients over the years and witnessed, particularly in the recent years working through the centre or when working in organisational settings, witnessing the impact of that person to person or people to people if it's a group setting dynamic, and sometimes really magical things can happen for people. Sometimes it's not possible and the person is not able or not ready, or for whatever reason the outcome is not quite the magical, but have witnessed both in personal work that I've done and also as a client of a number of therapists, and also witnessing colleagues and practitioners that I've worked with, and just the impact that counselling and therapeutic interventions can have on people for the better.
Yes.
When I say that, I always want to say without any hidden agenda. So it's almost like intentional practice to work with the client's needs in the core. So I think whether it's group, because myself and a colleague do quite a lot of group work, but the client is central. And I actually think in more recent years that focus on client needs, the client well-being, is coming much more to the fore, not just within our profession, not just within the psychological professions, but also in things like local governments, mental health that sits within NHS settings, and witnessing the power of people working across disciplinary boundaries in York, which is where I live, for the well-being of people who might have been around the gasworks a number of times with the mental health services and the medical model and decided it's not helping, but they can come into a hub setting where everybody's welcome, nobody's turned away, and it truly is a person-centered focus, and around that lots of different services that can kick in to help individuals. And I see that happening in counselling. I know many counsellors wouldn't see themselves as advocates or guides in any way, but sometimes we do share information. You know, we share things with clients that can make such a difference. And I've been witnessing that lately in that community hub setting that is incredibly powerful. And I think we are amazing as a profession, political, cultural, social movement or approach. And again, it's whether that's intentional or not. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling on, Kaz, but okay, it's taken me to places, places that there's a personal take on this, but there's also a political and a wider professional, having been in mental health most of my life. So there's something about what's on offer for individuals who can access psychological therapies, you know, counselling, therapy, that can really make a difference. It can make a difference, there's no doubt about it. And clients bring to us the social, cultural, political, all the social injustices that happen, various kinds of things. So I work in a community centre setting where people can be really, really financially stretched, and also work with colleagues who work in charitable organisations where people really struggle to be able to provide counselling for themselves, but knowing that it makes such a difference. So I know there's been a lot of excitement, movement, lobbying in the profession to have counsellors and therapists paid, and you know, ultimately that's what we want to see. We want to see people can train and apply for jobs and secure a practitioner post, or move into private practice, whichever they want to do. But I do think as a profession, I'm not sure I love my professional body, but I have a healthy criticism of all professional bodies. But one of BACP's previous strap lines was counselling changes lives, and I do think counselling can change lives. I've experienced it personally, seen it happen for others, and I think as a field, if we are a field, because I know there's different parts of the field that don't feel we're a field, but if we are a field, then we will have one hell of a lot to offer as a movement for change that makes a real positive impact for people. And I'm not saying that from a positive psychology perspective, I'm saying it from the perspective of somebody coming into counselling or couples work or group work and finding something about themselves, about something they need, about something they've realised, and that's precious. And I think that should be ultimately widely available to people, and that patients and clients have choice. Patients, if it's NHS, that's how they're viewed. We call them clients where we work, or where I work. Clients have choice. Ultimately, it offers a huge amount. I mean, I don't know if you've come across, Kaz, some of the social media stuff on Mick Cooper's latest book, which is coming out at the beginning of 2023.
Social justice?
Yes, about social injustices, some of the political edges of our profession, and perhaps the influence that we could have. And one of my fantasies is that we have people from the profession who end up in local politics, national politics, actually in leadership roles and influencing with an informed approach. and a deliberate practice which is collaborative. Sorry, I'm straying into the politics now because I hate it when they pitch battle. It's just unhelpful.
Well, interestingly, I was going to ask you a question about this, and everything you've said is, I mean, well, you've just said so much actually, and I think it's indicative of where we're at as a profession, because there's all those different elements. There's kind of, how do we make our profession, well, basically, how can we convince the government to utilise us more,
yes,
and put money behind us and all of that, recognise us.
Yes.
There's that aspect of it. And then there's, you picked up on things like therapists being paid, and you picked up on stuff around social justice, but also, you know, the very important things that we need to consider around, you know, the lives that people are living and how they bring that into the counselling room, which gets us into conversations around diversity and inclusion and all of that. So it's like there's all these different, this is more as well, but there's all these different things. Therapist needs, client needs. And I guess I had a question about what you feel in terms of how we can come together more as a profession, because, you know, you've done a lot for the BACP. And I know you and I talked before about, I've done things in the BACP, but I guess similarly, we've both had, I mean, I very much have feet in different, I've had feet in different camps, very different camps, and heard very different things from like being in a membership body and then being like co-lead of Therapists Connect, almost like opposite things.
Yes, absolutely.
This is what's happening in practice. This is what's happening in practice. And so there seems to be sometimes quite a lot of division. And everything that you've said there, it's just so important that we all recognise all of this. But I wonder, do you have any views on how membership bodies and researchers and kind of on the ground practitioners can come together more in all of this?
That's a really good and important question, and I wish I had an easy answer. I can say things, but whether it provides an answer, I'm not sure. Where it took me when you were talking at one point, you know how your brain fires off in different directions. One of the directions was, I read somewhere, and I can't for the life of me remember where it was, but recently a philosopher talking about humankind being on a really important cusp in our development as a race, as a human, as a global human race. And that there's a huge, I mean, there's always dissent, there's always dissonance, division and fighting and wars. But at the moment, what this philosopher was saying, and I'm not advocating for philosophy, but it was an interesting thought that the human race is on a cusp, and it's really important in this paradigm that we do things with deliberate practice, with intention, things that are non-violent and non-aggressive. It depends how you define aggression, because in a heated debate sometimes it can sound, but actually it's passion. It's people's passion getting there. So I thought that was really interesting what that person was saying, and it also took me to the fact that as humans we just have to look outside our practices and lived environments to see that across the globe, across history, there's always been conflict. There is something about the nature of the human beast, and some people might find this offensive, but there is something about the nature of the beast that we are wired, you know, the fight, flight, freeze, all of that. We're wired to protect or to attack if under threat and things like that. And I think the bit that I said about deliberate practice, it needs enough of us to be suppressing that attack and defend mode to move into consensus building mode, which can be quite difficult, I think. I think that's really, really tough to work together in smaller groupings or bigger groupings to reach something that people, even if they've got some questions or doubts, can sign up to. There is an agreement that this is a way to move forward. So I think it's very hard, Kaz, in a race where we all want the best for ourselves, our families, our loved ones, our clients, our friends, our organizations we support, all of that. But sometimes those aspirations can't always be lived out. And I think it's hard. That's really, really hard. And I think divisive things happen that serve to split. And you see that kind of splitting off and splitting into different groups or different kinds of pressure groups. And I think that's really important and vibrant and healthy, whatever healthy is, that there are dissenting voices and people with differing opinions. But the pulling together, for me, that needs some kind of global council, almost. A global council for counsellors. So like therapists connect globally.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I would love to see that happen. And there was, interesting, there was a conference in Edinburgh last year that took a pluralistic philosophical approach to look at mental health globally, to look at how globally we can collaborate to support the human race, I would say, as well as earn our own crust and, that kind of our vocation stuff, be satisfied in our lives as far as possible. But there's also a kind of a supra-order council or collective that is working to agreed values and agreed ways of working and of making meaning. And that is really, really difficult. In the world of arts, there's a term called meta-modernity. And I don't want to complicate things, but it's an interesting one. And it's that you make an intentional move to understand that there are chaotic forces abound and afoot in human relationships, human interaction, anything that humans get involved in, and different factions, different ways of seeing things. The difference with this is there's an intentional and deliberate practice to agree to those certain values. I mean, one example would be, you're not going to kill one another. That you're going to hold certain ways of being that are non-violent and that enable you to stay recognizing different parts and seeing that there's value in having different parts, because by the very nature of being a human, we're different in lots of different ways, whether it's color or age or spirituality or place of context where we live, all of those things. So it's an approach that attempts, and I'm not saying it does it well, but it attempts to hold things. And yeah, fantasy level, we need a global council. Yeah. And I think that's one way forward.
Yeah, and I think that idea of a global council, but almost on a community, you said therapists connect worldwide, and actually that's probably the dream, because we are a worldwide community, but that kind of being able to really broaden out. And it's all about listening for me, like talking and listening. I went to the pluralistic conference this year. I'm not a pluralistic practitioner, I'm an integrative practitioner, so they were obviously very, very close. I have lots of interests in what are the differences and all of that, so I was happy to be at this conference this year. And I'm gonna forget the presenter's name, so apologize if she's watching, but it was an amazing presentation on I know you've done a lot of work on domestic abuse and domestic violence, and it was an amazing presentation on that. And one of the points she made was about people not being listened to, and that researchers might kind of do a lot of work that they felt was very, very useful, But if there was a bit of a gap, and actually people, service users weren't being listened to enough, then it was just kind of this gap was becoming bigger and bigger. And for me, that's so important. And you said a couple of things: intentional, deliberate, being with values. And these things feel so, they just feel paramount, actually. And I know that there's a lot of crossovers between pluralism, pluralism as a philosophy, as well as pluralistic therapy, and trying to work with people with differing views and difference. And I'm a relational activist, so this is the same kind of thing. So it's really trying to keep relationship at the heart of things. But I do think there is something there about how can we listen to each other in a more productive way, and maybe, like you say, it is some kind of counsel or something that's needed in that.
What came to mind, one of the many things that came to mind was, I know that something called, it's a funding body, something called UK Research Institute, so UKRI, and they put out a call recently for charities. So instead of going from top down, like researcher down, they were going bottom up, and they were going from community groups, charities, groups that work with communities, individuals. So they were starting there. So they were inviting bids from partnerships that weren't researcher led, they were community led. And it's good to see that happening, because there have been pockets in the UK, like the Welsh government, they're really push the importance of collaborative working with citizens. So this was a similar principle. It's like, actually, the research questions need to come from the bottom up rather than top down. And then we can meet and form some kind of consensus about, so just what is the research question in this context around this topic, so that there's a collaborative meaning making and decision making process that gets to a consensus at some point. We've got the research question. And that's I'm part of a bigger group in York, which is about changing mental health in York, and how, changing the medicalised model to a much more person-centred, citizen-based model. And that's really, it's been incredibly tough, because even though people may have said, so some NHS voices have said, we absolutely support this, and they mean it, they absolutely support it. When it came to opening the doors of the community hub and releasing staff to be in there to support the multiple different roles that are in there, it was a difficult different story. Some of it about the very dire straits that NHS are in, everywhere at the moment, and we know nurses are striking. And can't blame them, because they're such an important workforce like us. So there's something about how can we do it differently. So you saying about consulting and listening to that person at the conference, I think is significant, because what that person was advocating, I think, is really important. We need multiple voices, and with that, the listening of those voices, but the authentic listening. I think that's, how do you define authentic listening? But it's that truly listening to citizens in York, for example, about their needs. So in this group that I'm part of, there are people from all walks of life, but what everybody shares is that they've had significant mental health issues that haven't always been able to be best supported through an IAP setting, for example. So these are people seeking support, and what the hub offers is that multidisciplinary, person-centered, in the truest possible sense, that it's their needs are prioritized. So I think I absolutely agree with what you were picking out of your conference experience. I think that to me, it feels almost like a no-brainer, and we have to do that. We have to commit to it, I think.
Yeah.
We have to commit to it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I tell you, from my own experience in York, it's taken us 3 years to get where we're at. And sometimes that has felt like inching forward and then being shot right back. So inch by inch. But that, yeah, I think we're such a force to be reckoned with, Kaz, that what you're saying takes me in my head also to the fact that maybe many more private practitioners, for example, might think about evaluating their practice or seeking their clients. You know, that's the researcher in me talking, but the person interested in hearing different people's voices, but that more practitioners might find it helpful to get feedback from their clients about what works, what doesn't work, what was helpful, what didn't help, so that they can build a kind of a body of knowledge about their practice, and that will grow over time. I'm sure lots of private practitioners do, but I must say, when I was in private practice many years ago, I didn't use forms, I didn't use evaluation forms. I would ask, but I didn't do anything that was a formal review or evaluation. But maybe that is a way of pulling in more client voices.
Yeah.
But from the research point of view, I do absolutely think that the client voice is as important as the other voices that are taking part in any project that's about looking at a particular aspect of therapy or the field, whatever it is. I feel like I've garbled on there. Sorry, Kaz.
No, I mean, I just wanted to say, first of all, you said earlier about listening and authentic listening, and I just wanted to say thank you for saying that. So important, and it's so important for people like you to actually make a point like that.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's hard.
Yeah. That just really landed with me.
Yeah, it's hard because when I say that, beneath that, there's lots of experience and lived human experience of, you know, if you're short of time, or if your manager or your boss is pushing you to do a particular role, and I'm thinking here of possibly counsellors that might have to work where there's a fast and high turnover of clients. That can feel like real pressure, and I think it's incumbent on us as individuals and on professional bodies to be pushing to have employers and organisations recognise that there are ways of working that are healthy for client base and the counsellor base. It's the whole kit and caboodle that needs to be considered, because I think when people are under pressure, I think authentic listening can be threatened. It's
Definitely. One of the reasons I found social media so fascinating over the last couple of years, since the pandemic happened, and obviously a lot of therapists went online, it meant that private practitioners like me, who'd worked for so many years really in isolation, I know more therapists than I've ever known now, but it also is surface some of these, I don't know, some of these things that practitioners feel. And like you said, there's so much goodness, there's so much knowledge out there. I absolutely agree with you. You know, the amount of information that could be collected about the client experience, about private practitioners' experience, and I think it's something that's very valuable, this the fact that people can actually talk more, and I'm sure that as time goes on, you know, and with technology and stuff, there may be different kinds of forums for these kinds of conversations.
Definitely. And again, the whole notion of practitioners developing a knowledge base through lived experience with their clients and their client base, I think, is really, really important. And there are ways, I think, that could be done. I know BACP had its ADAPT trial, where it worked with some private practitioners to look at using something called pragmatic tracker to use for various evaluation forms and things like that. And as I say that, I am aware that not all practitioners subscribe to the use of different kinds of measures. And for me, I have some significant questions about the original design of measures and the context in which they were designed and the teams through which they were designed. There are a couple of measures that are out there that we use that are very that were co-developed with clients, and that clients say, you know, it's okay to fill out. But there are some measures, you know, 30, 40, 50 items that both clients and practitioners might question, really. So I'm aware that it's a contentious area, but I guess it could be really helpful for us to know what kind of impact we're having, and to hear that in a way that enables it to be gathered, because some clients might not want to give feedback. They may find it difficult to give feedback. So it's finding ways that we can collaborate to build knowledge that's meaningful, we can do something with.
And again, like you're saying, putting the clients first, really working with what works for people.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a PhD student who's researching the use of routine outcome measures, and priority in his research is engaging with clients and talking with clients about their experience, because the knowledge base, the published studies, are very slim in relation to the client experience. So that's missing, you know, that's a big gap that needs to be looked at. And indeed, maybe there aren't yet the ways in which we can elicit feedback from clients in a way that's client friendly. You know, we're not there yet. And the other bits, just to add in the bit, because it's high in my mind at the moment, because a colleague and I are looking at a particular set of statements that are put to clients. And we recognized in a discussion that actually some of the roots of the theory that we were using comes from a white, westernized, colonized way of thinking. So there's that element as well. It's because particularly where we work with groups that come from diverse cultures and different religious, spiritual, cultural, social mores, then we have to question forms and measures. Are they fit for purpose, really? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So listen, you've already touched a little bit on your work at York St John Community Centre, but do you want to just give everyone a bit of an overview as to what you do there?
Yeah, we set out, myself and a poor colleague that I roped in to help me, we set out under the university senior leadership radar. And we set out with the good grace of a very supportive Deputy Vice Chancellor who said, just do it, get it up and running, and we'll take it from there. So we did, and we opened the doors to one client who came to us through a GP practice that we'd liaised with. So we started in a tiny way. And where we're at now, we're waiting to move into premises that the university are giving us, bespoke premises for the centre. We do all sorts of individual work. We work online, we work in person, we do group work. We've at times run something called a chat cafe, and we're looking to have that up and running again early in 2023 for different community groups, different groups within the broader York, North York's communities. So we do a whole range of things, and it's not always counselling as we know it. You know, the client counsellor. It's groups. It's well-being support in a group setting. because the chat cafe worked well, and what that has provided is social space where people who are lonely, isolated, could come for free cuppa, conversation, cake, biscuits, things like that. And we had from very elderly through to very young adults coming through with a range of different needs, but they knew they could come to a welcoming, warm space. I think, want to set that up again after Christmas. Those kinds of things. A lot of the things that we do, we have students, so we offer student placements. So trainee counsellors, therapists can have a placement. We've got trainee counselling psychologists. We'll have some trainee social workers and some trainee occupational therapists. Normally from within the university, from the courses in the university, but we also take students on placement from other training institutions. But all of the so the social work, the occupational therapy, the counselling psychology, the humanistic based models, and the centre ultimately, I guess I would say this, that it's pluralistic, because I guess we have lots of practitioners from lots of different perspectives, but there is the core kind of Rogerian values, actually, to which I'd add love, which some people might say is unconditional positive regard or a version of that. But yeah, so we really enjoy being available to the local community. We partner on some things and work closely with people from the charitable sector. We've built good connections with NHS, with the City, York Council. So we City of York Council, North Yorks County Council, and clients and patient representatives. So we work, I nearly said eclectically, but I guess it is kind of, we work it collaboratively. We want to work with as many people as we can in, not in competition, but in collaboration. We've had discussions about, because the charities, they're all competing for money, and the NHS might only have so much to give, and the commissioners from the council only have so much. So there is that human element again that brings competition in. But we work for the communities locally. We also work for the internal communities, which are students, and offer really great placements for students. And then we work with diverse kinds of communities. So feel excited about what next, because when we get the premises, Kaz, we've got a community language school which works with the growing number of immigrants in York, and second, third, fourth generation people in York who've come from other racial, cultural heritages. And we've got 2 great project leads who lead on that, and they work with families so that the mother tongue is not lost. So they're working with mother tongues and languages that are at risk of disappearing from second, third, fourth generation children. So we've got that. We've got another colleague who leads on a breastfeeding project. So it's about parents' well-being, and they work with a local charity, Treasure Chest. And we've got bereavement project underway. We've always done, to different degrees, domestic violence, because that's one of my areas of expertise. And then we offer just general help, general well-being support. So we've got some coaches and practitioners. What we aim to do is have a bit like a portal, a bit like the hub that I mentioned earlier, a bit like a portal where people can come along, and there's a whole range of things, and many of them are free. And where things are chargeable, it's non-exploitative. We can enter into payment agreements and all that, so that people can purchase 10 sessions of counselling, for example. So yeah, the centre team has grown, which is nice. And I've got some great colleagues around me that lead on different parts of the centre. And we've also now got a centre manager. So it's great. Yeah, I'm biased, so I would say that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you from an unbiased position, it sounds absolutely wonderful.
You can visit any time.
Can I? Oh, I will. I absolutely love York, so I will come and visit.
That's a date, definitely. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I guess again, this really sums up everything that you stand for and what's important for you in terms of really offering so many different things. Some people, by the way, in the community may know Dr. John Wilson.
I love Dr. John Wilson.
Yeah, who's part of this, isn't he? Yes. He does some of the bereavement work with you.
Yes. If I can just say a little bit about John, because John and I have known one another for a long time, and he and I were actually together yesterday at St Leonard's Hospice in York. I referred earlier to some statements that we read out to clients or pass to clients. That sits within the bereavement work that John leads on. And John's force to be reckoned with. He's another, he's a colleague that I love, really, genuinely love, but hugely respect and love working with him. And we were working together yesterday at the local hospice. So yeah, it's nice that people in Therapists Connect have come across John in different ways. Yeah.
Okay, well, it sounds like there's a lot that's happening there because it's growing, like you say. You're going to get your premises, and the team has grown and things. You've obviously done a lot of different projects. You continue to write. I think this is something you're really focus more on again at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Writing is something that I like doing, but don't get enough time. But now that I've got a really great team with me in the centre, I've deliberately stepped back from all the day-to-day running. I don't need to be involved. And it creates more time for meaningful research. And there's quite a lot of that around at the moment. And also for working with colleagues like John and Andrew Reeves and others on writing projects. So we've got a number of different things, and certainly one of them will be a book on domestic violence with Dr. Jeannette Roddy. I don't know if you've come across her. She's formerly at Salford Uni, but writing is something that I want to do, because being frank, and again, it's another human thing, I'd like to think I was immortal, but I'm not. And I'm also
people like to think that, right?
I know. I like to think I'll go on and on and on, but my body tells me otherwise. So for me, it's about readjusting and doing more of the things I really, really like doing. One, I can support the centre in lots of ways without having to do lots and lots of daily administrative things, because I've got colleagues that help take the centre forward. So I want to do more writing and, like I say, meaningful research of the kind that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, so writing is great.
That's the thing there at the moment. It's so important, I think, because our work, just the client work in itself, is a lot, and then all the other things that we can do and take on. I think there has to be, it's really important to have that point where you say, what is it I actually want to focus on? That's
essential, I think. And I don't know, they say therapy attracts particular personalities of different types, but I think having had years of therapy, that really helped me see that actually my well-being should matter, does matter, and has to be in the frame centrally. And that's been a long, hard slog to get to that place where I actually think I deserve this. I need that space, that bit of, even if it's a gorgeous coffee and bit of cake or something in a lovely setting, just watching the world go by, moments like that, and then bigger moments like that, and writing moments like that are more and more important. sounds almost like, when I say it, my mother used to be a union activist, and I've heard her talk, she's dead now, but I've heard her talk about working to rule and things like that. I don't mean working to rule, I mean really putting me in the frame in a way that's actually, if you don't do it, nobody else will, and you'll go on for longer. Yeah, and I work, some of the work I do, and I keep my practice very small deliberately, but some of the work, I've done lots of supervision, more supervision in recent years than therapeutic work, client one-to-one work, done lots of group. And I tend to work with people who've been traumatized, and it's important work, and I really value it. And some of it is with Dr. John Wilson in group settings. And we need to take care of ourselves in the midst of it. Yeah, because my mother died in November, and I knew that I needed to take a little bit of time out of the group, but John and I do it together with some support from other colleagues, and then others can step in. So it's that mindfulness, yeah, mindful mindset that we do matter as therapists. We do matter. Yeah, absolutely, in all senses.
Yeah, and it's actually so nice to hear you talking about all of this. You know, you've given so much. That's why we're doing this interview, because of the amount that you've given. But that kind of it's like permission to give some things to yourself.
Yeah, it's essential, I think. Hard one, but essential. Yeah. Yeah, because often as a if we are a workforce, if we were a workforce, most of us, it's a bit like nurses. We just get on with it. We just get on, and that's partly inherited from my dad. But he had his work ethic was just get on with it. Don't whinge, just do it. And if you find a way through, so find a kind of a positive resolution or outcome. And I think we often beaver away in what can feel like isolation, even if you're working in a team. I've never worked in IAPT. I've never worked in a team of IAPT therapists. I have worked in a charitable setting where you've worked as part of a group, but in private practice particularly, I think that could feel quite isolating. So there's something really important about being able to recognize one's needs, our needs, and reach out and create those connections. So you said earlier, I really like what you said earlier about Therapists Connect, and that you've got a big community around you. And I feel that way about the Pluralistic Network, which hosts the Pluralistic Conference, and feel that community connection in there, which, even though it's normally virtually, it's like this, it's online, you can still feel the connection. You can actually feel the connection at times in certain meetings. So there's something about that virtual knowledge of being connected, but also connected in some way. Because, as I say, we beaver away on our own normally. And yeah, we need playtime and fun time and process time and all of that. Yeah. Partner and family time, that kind of thing.
I was going to say, who is it outside of the profession?
Yes.
Where do you get your support from and your nourishment?
Yeah, I've got some lovely friends. John Wilson, one of them, who have been in my life for decades, or some more recent in my life. So friendships, because family, I've got very little family, very little family, and the closest relative I have, there's never going to be a relationship there, which is sad, saddens me, but they have some pathology that they means they're not very good in relationships. So friendships, really loving friendships where you might challenge one another and have difficult words, but there's love at the base of the connection. So friendships are really, really important. And my mother had a cousin who I've been in touch with across the years, but he's gorgeous. He's a lovely man, quite an elder in the community nowadays, but yeah, lovely. So I do have some lovely, I hate that word lovely, I don't mean to say lovely. I have some people who I connect with, who I can really feel, and who I know they can feel me. So there's a deep bond in the connections, which matters. But interestingly, because that takes me in my head, one of the thoughts fired off is about elders, and just to say it aloud, I guess, that John Wilson and myself are looking to do something with the other John Wilson from Online Events on aging and elders in the profession. So yeah, we've just got the concept. We haven't fleshed it out yet, but we will do and offer something next year. But yeah.
Okay, so watch this space on that one. Yeah, so what's next for you? Do you want to talk about anything? You've just said something there that might be coming. What else in terms of work?
In terms of the what next, key part will be the writing. So some writing around domestic abuse, writing around bereavement. So John and I are going to be doing a book on bereavement. Ethics in action, which is something you're familiar with. So there's a series coming from Routledge, so I'm really excited about that. And then at North York's level, continuing to do this community-facing work about mental health, about people's well-being and what people's needs are. Because I absolutely know that for some people, counselling is what's needed. But I also know some other people need something else. They're not in a place yet where they can explore themselves in that kind of setting. So yes, it's looking at different ways of extending that portal or that hub that's inclusive. And we've got a battle ahead, I think, a funding battle ahead. But there's a number of us involved in this. So there's something about pitching for services that are valued by clients and are valuable and give something to communities. Otherwise, we'll just see that repetitive waste year after year of millions of funding that's ploughed into projects that go nowhere. Or NHS programs that have to be limited, I know, but that we do get a fair few clients who come to us that have had CBT, and I'm not dissing CBT because I've got CBT colleagues and I do know it works for some people, but I have had clients come to the centre, many clients come saying, we're looking for something a bit different. It didn't make a sufficient difference for them. Yeah, so it's continuing that and continuing to be able to offer something that people want, rather than coming in as an expert in a top-down approach and saying, this is what you need. We want to find out what do people want, and we're already doing that. And this is a lovely bit of story, but at 30 Clarence Street, which is on the edge of my university's campus, there's a multidisciplinary group, and I'm part of that grouping. And for most of the time that it's been running as like a community hub, the door has been locked. And when the Community Mental Health Hub formally opened in October, it took about 4, 5, 6 weeks, but gradually, people came around to let's unlock the doors. Let's open the doors so that people can just come in, and it's made a huge difference. There's been some interesting responses to that about the door being open.
Wow.
So yeah, really interesting. The team that deliver, the psychological therapist is in there, the social worker, the community pathways to recovery workers, so that work within local councils, community action groups led by the council, social prescribers, a whole range of people in there, and they're all working together to have it as that open space, so that it's welcoming. Yeah, so the only thing that's missing is housing. So you can probably get that I'm advocating that I'm seeing us as therapist profession having a lot to offer, huge amounts to offer, where we can work in teams or connected to teams or working with teams for the best of clients that come our way. For me, there is something powerful about working in a collaborative team. Yeah. Challenging, but powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes back to what we were talking about earlier,
yes,
people with their differences, but collaboration, something I really believe in as well. But this comes through in all of your work and how you've spoken today. The backbone of everything is about relationship and about love, and about it just really getting in there. Like, as a relational therapist, I really like listening to you, because I can see that that's the kind of thread.
Right. Okay. And that brings me
fit with you.
I guess it does when you say that. And it took me immediately to my partner, Pat, who's my love partner and has been for decades. And that will be another bit of my work moving forward, that more time for play, I think. So it's another version of relationship, different, but relationship is central, private life, practitioner life. And she's sacrificed a lot, I think, over the years. So I think, she deserves a bit more of my time.
Absolutely. You need to give it to her, Lynn. I know you.
I will.
Well, I know you, in the Therapy Today article, you did an interview, a big interview with Catherine Jackson. You did kind of say that actually she's been such a support for you, and you've been together for what, 30 years?
Oh yeah, we first met in the 80s, mid 80s, and then ultimately got together in the 80s. But yeah, we've been together a long time. And like all relationships, therapeutic or otherwise, there's been ups and downs. That's relationship, isn't it? But again, it's that, and I'm aware some people use this differently, but it's that intentionality and deliberate practice that we recognize we want to be together, and we're strong together, and we can survive traumas in the relationship and in our lives. And so yeah, there's something about that commitment to one another.
Okay, well, is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to kind of mention or bring up, or we've covered so many bases?
I don't think so. I'm sure we're all looking at the counselling professional bodies at the moment and thinking, my goodness, where are we all going? So I'm
glad you brought it up.
I'm stating the obvious. And this is ridiculous, but I had a moment recently of the reason I stepped forward for chair of BACP, when I did step forward and was voted in, was a nightmare. Not just one nightmare, but dreams about the profession and BACP being taken over by something dangerous. So I, in my grandiosity, stepped forward thinking, I've got to play a part in helping the profession. So
this was in 2008, was it?
It was in 2008. And I remember approaching the then chair and saying, what do I have to do? And then just talking with some colleagues and thinking, I do need to step forward. But I'm not saying that I should step forward, but I've had those moments again recently, looking at the profession and what's happening across not just one or two professional bodies, but a number, thinking, what's going on? Excuse me, I'll just turn this down. Apologies. Thinking, where is this going? It really needs some strong leadership at the moment. So yes, I'm watching with interest. As a member, putting my member hat on of a professional body, watching with interest. And I was going to go to the AGM, but my mother had died, and it just wasn't. I couldn't go. It felt like, I don't know why, but it felt like to me that it could be a really important AGM this year. But there'll be lots of important moments along the way, I guess, because in terms of BACP, I think there's an interim CEO now. So yeah, just watching with interest what happens in BACP, UKCP, NCS, all of the kind of key players.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, I think for many therapists, it felt quite destabilizing, actually. It's felt quite destabilizing recently, particularly with a lot of change at leadership level. Which I don't think is helpful for therapists, because therapists don't feel confident and stable in with their professional bodies. That's not going to help clients, actually.
Absolutely. And I think it can be destabilizing, and I've heard that from lots of people, actually. I've not heard a great deal about the AGM, but things will unfold. But we do need a period of stabilization, and ideally that theme of working collaboratively, working across the professional bodies rather, and there's been much more of that, I know, in our profession lately, but needing more of that. I think that they're working across the piece, all of them working across the piece. So my hope is that it will right itself gradually, and I'm sure it will. I think there's a period of turbulence, but it will come out of that. But yeah, we do need a stable team taking forward the professional bodies, mindful of the voices of their members, really.
Well, I saw that the impact assessment for Scoped came out a couple of days ago. I haven't had a chance to read it like in great detail and full. You haven't either.
I haven't, not yet.
But I know that there has been a couple of things picked out in there, and maybe some things around EDI, which is again, I mean, you were talking about it earlier. If you're going to represent a profession, it's got to be all voices and all people, and the differences in people. So I think there's going to have to be some I guess more looking at that side of things. But there was also a comment actually on the recognition of people who are critical of Scoped, and actually I think the fact that there was a recognition in that report, that was really important, because there seems to have been a kind of a message sent out recently that there are no people opposing Scoped, and that's not true. And it doesn't really matter if you're for Scoped, if you're against Scoped, and actually I know a lot of people who are against Scoped, but those people may be against Scoped for different reasons. So some people may be pro-regulation but against Scoped, and some people may be like, no, I don't want any form of kind of regulation, and some people might be, well, this doesn't represent my modality. There's so many different people in that pool, I guess. And this, I just felt that thing of actually recognizing that those people were there and saying, that maybe there needs to be a space to hear those people. It felt really, really really crucial, actually, because I know that there's been a lot of conversations between membership bodies and healing the divisions that there have been, but there seems to have been in all of this I don't know, lack of consideration about the potential division, disharmony between practitioners themselves.
Absolutely. That's such a tricky one, Kaz, because I lived through the first NICE guidelines on counselling for depression, and that line that people have rightly said that BACP took at that time, which was there's counselling, there's psychotherapy, different perhaps, but similarly valued, so that they are similarly valued. That's the key thing. And I think a system that would create, even if it's not the intention, but that would create a divisive system is very tricky. So I don't know what will happen moving forward, but again, my hope would be that bodies work across the bodies themselves in terms of the administrative side of things, but also the membership to smooth these out. Because I remember almost physical battles between counselling and psychotherapy lobbies around the possibility of being statutorily regulated, and that elicited some really toxic things across different factions. It was really horrible. And I guess, again, which is another, that kind of line that goes all the way through my me, I guess, is that wanting to work collaboratively, accepting difference, recognizing difference, recognizing that there may be some things that it's really, really hard to reach a consensus on, but aiming for some, ideally, consensus. So who knows what will happen with BSB, UKCB, and all the other professional bodies that move forward on ScopeEd, or however it moves forward. And I've played a part in it. I'm not against it, but I certainly wouldn't want something that is divisive. That was never the intention. And I remember someone saying to me, because one of the things that ScopeEd did was literally scope training curricula across the field. So psychotherapy curricula, counselling curricula, and anything else that was there. And there was an evident differentiation. And a crude example would be that on some courses, people have to do 100 hours of practice. On some courses, people have to do 450 hours of supervised practice. And I know some people have said, well, just because you do 450 hours, it doesn't mean that, you're better or best. And of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. But equally, you could say that about the 100 hours. You could compare in lots of different ways. But I think there's still more work to be done to unpick who we are as practitioners, counsellors, psychotherapists, and the toxic bit that got in the way. And thankfully, I think that there's been a lot of movement on that. But the toxic bit in 2008-9 was that a number of campaigners and people lobbying thought that psychotherapy was better than. It's that better than and less than that we need to absolutely take out of anything that's happening. The difficulty comes when you look at people who are responsible for work programs, and they look at where people might sit on a grade, like an NHS grade or an organisational salary grade. So where people are employed in an organisational setting, to have to avoid anything that's exploitative or harmful, and that sees counsellors as less than. I don't know if all that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we could talk for hours about this.
I could.
But I think, and I do understand that Scope started as this kind of mapping as a research project, the mapping, and I think that's been one of the issues. Actually, it's never quite clear exactly these days what it is, and was it just about mapping? Is it about what's going to happen to existing practitioners? And also, I suppose the question, I would have loved to have seen this to have been such a long process, actually, of you do the mapping and then you say, is that right? You know, like, you know, for instance, in London, you know, if you want to go to I shouldn't really say the institutions, but anyway, if you want to go to one of the leading institutions or whatever, you have to pay a hell of a lot of money in order to do one of the psychotherapy masters. Now, you know, because you work in education, and I've done a lot in education before I was in this field, that actually, because things are regulated, training and stuff, qualifications are standardized. So if you were to do a master's, you would pay, you know, generally the same, you know, wherever you went. And of course, the problem in our profession is that some of the private colleges actually may be charging a lot more. And then, of course, then that brings up stuff around equality.
Of course.
So I would have loved to have seen that. They kind of, okay, what's here? And now, is this right, and how can we make this better, and how can we make training better? Actually, let's have a standardized thing of training. I mean, I'm going off, this is just my own
Do you know
opinion.
what, Kaz? You are absolutely onto something about training. I think training is an under-researched area that really needs, my take, personally, professionally, it needs to be looked at. Absolutely agree. And I think those kind of divisive things and those injustices, I can't imagine any of the professional bodies want to set that up, but there are inequities across the piece in terms of what people can afford to access training. So I know professional bodies can do things like bursaries and things like that, but we, as a centre, we've taken students on placement from different institutions, from a local CPCAB course, which the counsellors that we had were excellent. They were all very mature people. I'm not talking about age, but very mature people who came with a real commitment because they wanted to be involved in helping others move on in their life. And they were some of the best counsellors we've had. And we also have counsellors who come from institutions where they pay substantial amounts of money to train. So it's interesting. We've had people in our centre who are officially training on a counselling course, and also others who are officially training on a psychotherapy training. And it's been interesting to see some of the differences. But the bottom line is what I know lots of people have said: the person of the therapist and their ability and their mindset and their presence and all of that. And my hope, and as I say, I have a lot of fondness for BACP, and I have been very actively involved in Scope Ed and other voluntary work in BACP. My hope is that moving forward, there's some serious work in some of the areas that you've described. And for me, the work programming, what does this mean for people in the world of work? What does it mean for people accessing training? All of that. Because the little group that myself and, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me naming him, a colleague called Alan Dennett, who comes from York, we were key players in a group that wrote a report that said we need to be mapping the training field to look at what's happening. And we had people from person-centered, psychodynamic, CBT, all different flavors of therapeutic stance. So it would be good to see that the professional bodies work to take things forward in a way that can be collaboratively engaged with and productively engaged with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, you know, leadership is so important in that, actually. And this stuff that we're talking about is super important.
It's very important. What's the future of our professional body and our professional field? And looking around the field, when you look at other professional bodies that are highly consultative or moving along well with their membership bodies, there are some that appear to manage that. I'm looking from the outside in. And hopefully, you know, UKCP, BACP, the others involved in Scope Ed, if it goes ahead, that they're working together to address some of the potential inequities that are there. Yeah.
Well, you know, I guess one of the reasons that I have huge respect for you is because you have done so much work across, it's like you can easily talk about all of this, like from, you know, working as a therapist to working as a researcher to being in the membership bodies to doing that community work with clients, but also community work with other practitioners and things. So, you know, I really think we need more people like you. I mean, you've obviously given a lifetime to this, and it's only right that you focus on the things that the writing, like, you want to really focus on. But yeah, that just strikes me. I really admire that in you, and it strikes me as so important for, you know, figures who do lead and who can, you know, really offer I guess good leadership and perspective from, you know, different people and different spheres.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and that took me right back to that horrible word, metamodernity. And multi-perspectivism sits within that way of that mindset of looking at the world.
Yeah.
So let's hope our next CEO and others at the various bodies can bring a set of skills and experiences that bodes well for the future of our profession, really. Or professions, because there's quite a lot of us involved in counselling and therapy and groups, and
Okay, well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. I just want to say thank you for coming to chat with me. I suppose well, we're going to release this video for our birthday. For anyone who doesn't know, we're very active on Twitter, so you can find us on Twitter, therapists_C. So we're Therapists Connect. You can use our hashtag on anything, hashtag Therapists Connect, and we will retweet it. We're also on Instagram. Our account is Therapists Connect on Instagram. So we're going to release this video on our birthday on January the 6th. And I just want to say thank you so much, Lynn.
And thank you, Kaz. And birthday celebrations to all in the network.
Thank you. All right, take care.
Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.